The European Union is once again stepping in where the gaming industry clearly thought it could run amok forever. In an attempt to protect consumers from being squeezed dry by what can only be described as manipulative business practices, the EU has launched a crackdown on major gaming companies for their underhanded monetization schemes. These so-called sneaky spending schemes are essentially strategies that game developers use to lure players, often children, into spending more money than they probably should on in-game purchases. We're talking about loot boxes, microtransactions, and other predatory techniques. For years, companies like Activision, Blizzard, Electronic Arts, and even Epic Games have relied on these methods to rake in billions. They've built games where in-game purchases go from optional to almost necessary if you want to keep up with other players or just enjoy the game at a reasonable pace. The EU, along with European consumer protection groups, has finally had enough of watching kids and, let's be honest, even adults fall into these traps. These practices range from pay-to-win systems, which make paying customers ridiculously overpowered compared to those who just want to enjoy the game they've already bought, to loot boxes, which are essentially legalized gambling. And who doesn't love that? The EU has pointed out that many of these mechanics violate consumer protection regulations, calling them out as not only unethical but downright aggressive. In particular, the use of loot boxes has been a focal point. Loot boxes encourage players to spend real money for the chance to win a virtual item, a system that closely mirrors gambling. This is especially dangerous for younger players who often don't fully grasp the financial implications of constantly sinking money into a game for something they may never receive. Critics have long compared loot boxes to slot machines, but with shinier graphics and fewer regulations. And now, finally, the EU is working on addressing that. While some game companies have made half-hearted attempts to rein in these practices, such as setting spending limits or offering clearer warnings, it's mostly window dressing. The revenue from these in-game purchases is so high that they've had little incentive to change, at least until now. The EU's latest regulations are a response to mounting pressure from consumer groups across Europe who've had enough of watching their kids get sucked into spending money on in-game cosmetics or boosts that don't even have real-world value. Moreover, the EU is demanding transparency from game developers. No more hiding behind layers of virtual currencies or obfuscating the real cost of in-game items. The idea is to make it clear to players how much they're spending and what they're getting before they hit that purchase button. This move is a part of a broader effort to reform the gaming industry with the hope of shifting it away from the exploitative business models that have become so pervasive. The crackdown isn't limited to Europe either. The impact of these regulations could ripple across the globe as companies adapt to avoid fines and penalties in one of the world's largest gaming markets. As it turns out, there's only so long a company can keep acting like a slot machine operator before someone, like the EU, steps in and tells them to knock it off. It's honestly surprising that it took this long for regulatory bodies to notice these tactics, but better late than never. Maybe now, instead of focusing on how to milk players for all they're worth, developers can focus on making games that are, actually fun and fair to play. That's going to wrap it up for today's video. Don't forget to like the video if you actually enjoyed it. Drop a comment if you think I'm wrong. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one, unless you're too busy getting trapped in another sneaky gaming monetization scheme.